So, the next speaker I'm incredibly excited about. I've been aware of Mike's work for the past couple of years. He's one of the behemoths within the iOS circuit, and I've been desperate to catch him, but every single time have managed to miss his talks whenever he's spoken somewhere I am. He's got one of the most exciting backstories for any developer I've ever known. He learned how to code in the belly of a plane whilst he was waiting to load cargo into the plane when he was working for an airline company. He then went on to work for Apple as one of their senior engineers. I believe he actually walked in on his first day at Apple dressed as a pirate with the banners of his game waving in one infinite loop, which is rather exciting. He's moved on to other things now. So he now runs Amsterdam, which is one of the more exciting little startups that is in Amsterdam, which is getting people into the app market, getting people building more apps, and making Amsterdam one of the places to be, as well as New Lemurs, which is his educational games and consulting company. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome to the stage the rather attractive Lemur, Mike Lee.
Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of the rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them. About the only thing you can't do is ignore them. Because they change things. They push the human race forward. While some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. Those were the words that changed my mind about Apple. In 1997, when the Think Different campaign launched, when Steve Jobs came back to Apple to take over the company again, I was a recently recovered Windows fanboy. Then I discovered that I didn't so much love Windows as I hated Apple. Hated Apple, hated those damn smarmy Apple people. The girl I lost my virginity to bought a Mac and I dumped her for that. Yeah. So, 1997, right? That was right before Apple introduced the iMac, which sort of changed the way that we thought about what a computer was, what a computer could be, how a computer could fit into our lives. And this wasn't the first time they'd done this, of course. In 1976, when I was born, when Apple was born, the Apple II changed the way that we thought of computers. In 1984, with the Macintosh again. Then in 97, and of course 10 years after that, in 2007, with iPhone. So here's to the crazy ones, the ones who changed the world. But the thing about the Think Different campaign, it's interesting because, you know, Steve Jobs actually spoke to developers that same year about the topic of being different. And his words were really interesting. He said, we don't want to be different. We are different. We don't want to be different. We are willing to be different where it's necessary to be much better. It's not about being different for difference's sake. It's about being much better. It's about being unafraid of being different as necessary and same as necessary. The reason why these words spoke so much to me is because, like most of you, I am different. In 1997, I was barely a functional human being. My ADHD is so severe that reading a book will cause me to pass out, and I didn't know why that was happening. I didn't know about the diagnosis. I didn't function because I had been almost murdered a few years earlier, and I had post-traumatic stress disorder, and because we hadn't gone quite on the series of wars that we had, that wasn't really something that people were familiar with. It was mostly associated with Vietnam veterans, and since I had never been to Vietnam, nobody knew what to do with me. And so, when somebody put those words together with the pictures of every hero, of Martin Luther King, of Gandhi, of Richard Branson, of Amelia Earhart, that said something to me. That said that being different isn't necessarily bad. It said being different is the route to being better. And if you're better enough, maybe one day you'll be Apple good. So I am Mike Lee, that is me, a younger, fatter version of me. And I'm here to represent Apple, but I can't possibly represent Apple. I couldn't possibly, not only because I do not work at Apple anymore, but because how am I going to tell you 38 years of business strategy implemented by tens of thousands of people in 45 minutes? That's not going to happen. And I don't need to tell you why Apple is great. I don't need to tell you why people care about Apple, because you either know or you wish you didn't know. But I have my own understanding of what makes Apple so good, of what makes Apple so different in this way. And I think it's relatively simple. In the same way that getting yourself an Apple badge where you're dressed like a pirate is relatively simple. You just get a job at Apple and show up on your first day dressed like a pirate. Simple doesn't always mean easy, though. Some truths, you know that they're true, but that's only the beginning. And that, I think, is what is at the core of Apple, is the willingness to examine and accept hard truths. That's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about hard truths. I want to talk about the one actual hard truth, and then I want to give you some examples. Or as one of my fellow speakers put it, so the talk is entitled Death Plus Examples. Got it. Here's the thing. Eventually nobody will care. That's the reality of things. You're going to die, your kids are going to die, and the best case scenario is that you die first, as it has been for billions of years. That's the reality of things. It sucks, doesn't it? We all know, and yet we all don't want to know. Because it puts everything in such stark relief. In the way that having a gun in your mouth puts things in stark relief. This is one of my favorite pictures in the entire history of the internet. Because I know what that guy feels like. That surgeon, I know what it feels like to be working at something so vital and so important for so long that everyone around you has collapsed onto the floor. And all you can do is just sort of sit there shaking your head. I have no idea what this feels like. I have no idea what it feels like to do something so important that 25 years later, the life you saved still remembers it. I don't think anybody here has done anything this important. And why? Because we're not good enough? No, that's a misconception. We're all just people here. All of us. Apple people, Windows people, web people, Android people, smart people, stupid people, fat people, ugly people. We're all the same, you get it? We're all born into this nonsensical, unjust world, and we have to try to figure it out and come up with some meaning for ourselves. And most of us fail because we can't face the hard truths, and we would rather do things like this. This is my other favorite picture from the internet. This is the number one problem that app makers have. They keep building shit like this. Like, I'm not making a judgment on Harry Potter, Obama, Sonic the Hedgehog, the number 10, or tulips. But come on. Really? Why? Why would you do that? This is 90% of technology production. It's just lousy copies of something else that somebody thought was good. And the other 10%, minus the rounding error, is basically this guy. You guys remember this guy? Right? Tim the Toolman Taylor, Tim Allen's character from Home Improvement. He's the one who's always like, right? It's like, I rewired it, more power. You know, this is a man with a tool who is looking for a job with which to apply that tool. This is the 10% of technology production that isn't a copy of other stuff. It's just us inventing stuff because we think it would be cool, and then productizing it, and then marketizing it. And those aren't even real words. Really? You want to spend your life doing that, just building crap and hoping that somebody will find a use for it? To what end? This is the question I find myself asking most of the time in technology. Whether it's a technical question or just a life advice question, to what end? Why? Why are you wasting your time on this? You know, it's interesting. When I first started in this industry, the Apple part of it, not just the programming part of it, like I started by doing an apprenticeship, a live-in apprenticeship. And that involved having to get rid of everything that I owned. Like, I was married, I had a house, the house was full of a lifetime of crap, and I had to get rid of it all, somehow. And so I thought, okay, no problem, I'll just list it all on to internets and sell it. But then nobody wants my crap. And then I thought, well, I guess I'll just donate it and take the tax deduction? But I couldn't even give it away. Most of the stuff I ended up throwing away or burning in a pile. It has that kind of perspective. Realizing that the stuff that people spend a lot of their time trying to get is just a bunch of useless crap. It's just consumption. It doesn't mean anything. It means even less than everything else. When I left Seattle, where I had been living for 10 years, where I did the whole airline thing and the living in the basement of some dude thing, the beginning of this whole story, I moved to California because iPhone came out, and I knew it was going to be a gold rush, and I wanted to be a part of it. And one of my friends who I was saying goodbye to, he said, that's so awesome that you're following your dreams. I'm following my dreams too. I'm working really hard because I want to retire when I'm 45, so I can spend all my time doing what I want. And I'm like, what do you want to do? I want to spend time with my family and fish. And I said, no, you don't. You're lying. You're lying to yourself. Because if that's all you want out of life, you can do that now. Spending time with your family and fishing does not cost a lot of money. The reality is, you're trying to set up some unsustainable system that is your lifestyle and save up enough that you can have that unsustainable system until you are dead. That is an unnecessary waste of time. If all you want out of life is to spend time with your family and fish, fish now while there are still fish other than jellyfish in the ocean, and spend time with your kids while they don't resent you for never being there. I think as creators, you have to be aware of the potential tragedies that might befall you. The 3 tragedies of creation. The first of these tragedies, you know, it's the classical tragedy, the Greek tragedy. Not joining the Eurozone, but rather trying to do something and failing, right? I don't know how they teach literature, how they teach English literature here in England, but in the US, we have this mistaken notion that's been repeated so many times that we think that it's true, that a classical tragedy is the story of a hero who has a fatal flaw, and that's what screws everything up. Based on this Greek word, which I'm probably mispronounced, hamartia. Right? Hamartia is the hero's fatal flaw. But the definition of hamartia is not the hero's fatal flaw. The definition of hamantia is to aim for the bullseye and to miss. Is this the only mic? I guess it is. That is the hero's fatal flaw, that the hero tried to do something. When you try to do something, you have taken a very big risk that you're going to screw everything up. And so this whole notion of, hey, just do it and see what happens. Evil is the default. Then there's the modern tragedy, and that's doing evil by accident. This is what we do. This is why I'm here. And then, of course, there's the personal tragedy, which is leaving your loved ones to pursue a goal that is neither new nor necessary. When in fact, if you have kids, or anyone that you care about, and you're not with them, you'd better be doing something that is damn well new and damn well necessary. Because holy crap, what are you wasting? And for what? This implies everything. This implies that you need to focus on things, that you need to be working on the right thing and not all the wrong thing, that you need to be solving the right problems and not all of the wrong problems. I have this habit of not being able to get to sleep because I'm lying in bed trying to really solve some problem that's not even a real problem and might not even have a solution. It's just that my brain is so tuned to trying to solve problems all the time that that's what I'm always trying to do. I'm always trying to solve a problem. And it doesn't matter how necessary or even real the problem is, that's what my brain does. You put a problem there, it tries to solve it. When I get really sleep deprived, my friends like to play this joke where they ask me questions that no sane person would answer, and then I just answer them because I can't tell that they're kidding. This is us most of the time. We're trying to solve problems that are neither important nor necessary or possibly even real, when there are actual problems that we could be trying to solve that we're not solving because we're wasting our time on bullshit. It implies that you should sweat the details. Because why the hell would you do anything half-ass? Why would you do that? Use your whole ass, come on. I don't understand people who do things but then they don't care about them. And they just sort of toss them out there. And they don't pay attention to just the details. You know who does that? Employees do that. People who have a job and get paid and really could give, they don't care. They don't care about the product, they don't care about the people. Not all employees are like that, but most of them are. Presence. I think that there's an Apple API called Presence. I don't care. Because I'm here with you now. Fully. As I hope that you're here with me. When you're with your friends, when you're with the people you love, are you there with them? Or are you here with a bunch of idiots on the internet who really don't matter? I like to, when I go to a restaurant, play this game where we all put our phones down in the middle of the table and the first one to pick it up has to pay. You start to feel that heroin bug crawling in you, and you gotta have that sweet internet. Was it Louis C.K. who said, try turning off the television when your children are watching it and watch what happens to them and how they react, and is that healthy? It implies sacrifice. Sacrifice is how we change the world. What do you want? Think about what you want. Think about everything that is not that. Think about burning everything that is not that to fuel the fires of that ambition. If you are truly willing to do that, then I see no reason why you couldn't accomplish as much or more than somebody like me. That's all I am. I'm just a person whose family sucks, who is of mixed race, who doesn't belong anywhere, who fits in no culture, who is forced to just live and just do the things that I think are important, and everything else is sacrifice. Hard lessons. I want to share some of the hard lessons that got me to Apple that I learned along the way. and then some of the hard lessons, if we have time, that I've learned since. The first lesson I think that you get as a kid is be yourself. And this is like, it's true, but it's also really misleading. Because the impression that you get growing up in the age that we all grew up is that you are preternaturally gifted. You are already wonderful. Perfect, really. The only mistake you make is getting in your own way. If you would just be yourself, you could have everything, that person would like you. Just be yourself. Like 20 years I got this advice. Just be yourself. And you know what the problem is? I suck. More than now. Be yourself because you have to be yourself, because who else are you going to be? People hate fakers. You will hate yourself for faking. It's a full-time job, faking. You have to be yourself. It's the only option you have. But here's what they don't tell you. You have to make yourself awesome. Right? Like, when I was younger and like pining for the people who didn't like me to like me, nobody told me, why don't you learn to play the guitar? That would have been really good advice. Or anything to make who I was better. Because I'm stuck as me. Just like how you're all stuck as you. Where do you live? Are you stuck there? Make it awesome. This is the other really hard lesson from my childhood is nobody will save you. You know, we watch movies and we watch TV shows, and every problem has a resolution, has some hero who comes in and cleans everything up, and that's not how the world actually works. The world is not just. The world does not care about you. Nobody will save you. You have a good idea? Nobody's going to build it. Nobody cares. Sitting in the belly of that plane, I realized I have so many ideas, so many great ideas. Nobody cares. The people who build their ideas, the people who do the work, those are the ones with the glory. That's when I started teaching myself to code, so that I could build the things that I thought in my head, and not be that person who shows up and says, well, I'm not going to build it myself, obviously, but I'll pay you to do it. I mean, you know, bless those people, but I don't think any of those people would be here. If you're here, if you've actually physically removed yourself from everything good in your life to come here and listen to some dick in a lemur suit yell at you, I hope that it's because you're trying to build something. Here's the best piece of advice I ever got from a dick who was yelling at me. Learn a skill. Kind of related. Here's how it went. I was at the airline. It was raining. I was cold. I was wet. I was unhappy for 5 years. And one of my coworkers was dry and warm and inside soldering some stuff together. And I was like, man, you have an easy job. And he said, I get paid more too. And I said, how did you get this job? And he said, it's called skilled labor. Look into it. And I thought, what a dick. But man, that was a great decision. That was a great decision. I have never been so unafraid as I have been when I knew that I was useful. No one will save you, but they sure as hell will use you. If you are useful, that might actually work out. Another piece of advice in this vein, funny story, the first time I ever went to Apple, I really wanted to go to Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference. This was like a dream of mine for years. And I finally managed to, get a programming job, and I was like, great, I want to go to WWDC. And they were like, well, we can't really afford to send you to WW this year, but your boss's nephew works at Apple. So if you want to fly down to Cupertino, then you could go, check out Apple if you're interested in that. And I was already at the airport at that point. It's like, I'm there. And we flew down to Cupertino, and we hung out with this guy, and we got the tour of Apple. If you've ever been to One Infinite Loop, you know what the tour of Apple is. You get to go have lunch at Cafe Max, and then you get to go to the gift shop, and that's it. You're not allowed to see anything or go anywhere else. But it was still super awesome. It was still super awesome. It's like having lunch at the Googleplex, right? It's just, you got to do it once. So, I was really into Java at the time, and I really hated Xcode. Objective-C was just like, what? And I just wanted to use Java-C and just do it the way that I wanted to do it. And I was like, how do I get a job at Apple? How do I get here? And dude was like, well, if you want to program for Java, then you should probably go to Java 1. If you want to be a Mac programmer, then you should learn to do it like it's done. And I was like, what a dick. But he had a good point. It's way harder to do things your own way, and you don't really go to school to be smart. You go to school to be dumb and to learn. So I learned Xcode and I learned Objective-C, even though there was like no way you would ever make money programming with Objective-C. Well, sometimes things work out. You might be surprised to hear this, but I kind of thought that I was pretty smart back then. No. I went to my first WWDC. I quit that job at the airline. They offered people money to leave because the airline industry is always having problems. And so even though it was like my first white-collar job and I was programming, it was amazing, I knew that I could do better, Like there had to be something more than enterprise, right? Like more than just enterprise. So I went to my first dub. I got a scholarship for the ticket. I used my flight benefits for the flight. I got a hotel in a less nice part of San Francisco, a more crappy part of San Francisco, for $100. I did the whole conference for $100. I lived in Moscone. I ate only conference food. At the time, it was like, hey, free food, better than airplane food, awesome. And I went there like, oh, hey, look, you're not going to be able to see the two words I put on the screen. I think I stepped on this. Yeah. So I get to the conference and I'm like, I'm going to show these people how smart I am. And, I just kind of taught myself to code and just kind of made stuff up for a couple of years. And, it was good enough to like make training systems for the airline. It was good enough to work with the terrorist watch list. But it wasn't good enough for Apple. And being surrounded by Apple software engineers for the first time, it was like, oh my God, I know nothing. It was the most humiliating experience of my life. Just embarrassing. How dumb I was. How smart they all were. And I learned another very important lesson, which is sometimes you just need help. And so I found, the person who I thought would be able to help me, and I asked them if I could work for them for free. Because I had, some money from leaving the airline. And he said, sure. Then he invited me to live in his basement, and then I burned everything I owned, and the rest is history. Then iPhone came out, and that all got crazy. And my coworker, the other guy who had come to work, he got hired by Apple to build iOS. And I was like super jealous of that. And I asked, one of the evangelists at Apple, I said, it's like, that's super awesome, that you hire this guy. I'm super jealous of that. And he said, when you make the first iPhone game, you can come work at Apple too. Be awesome or be quiet. He didn't say that, but that's what he meant. Every time I have ever said something to an Apple person about how I wish I could work at Apple, I've always gotten a very similar response. Do something amazing, and then you can come work at Apple. So, you know, I did something. I don't know if it was amazing. It seemed amazing at the time. I shipped a game on iOS that made money. I guess it is kind of amazing. It was a long time ago. I got that job at Apple. I walked into one infinite loop with the banners of my game swinging in the, not really the breeze, the air conditioning, I guess, whatever. You just got to be awesome, you know, you just got to put up or shut up. It's so simple. It's not easy. So those were the lessons that kind of got me to Apple. I've learned a lot since. The question everybody always asks is, why did you leave Apple? And to my mind, I never really did leave Apple. You know, to my mind, I just sort of took a different assignment, and that assignment was to travel the world, try living in Europe, basically learn the kinds of things that I would never learn in Cupertino. That led to Amsterdam, the nonprofit that led to the new Lemurs, the for-profit. And that led to a lot of just really painful lessons because we made games again. Because a terrible thing to ship a successful game, because then you think you know how to ship successful games, and nobody knows how to ship successful games. Like, look at the fact that Angry Birds, probably the biggest, most famous game ever on iOS, their next game was pretty much a flop, and every other game after that, and the 52 before that. Like, games is hard. But I've learned a lot of things. For example, I've learned that you really need to work with people you respect. And here's what I mean by that. You know the people that you really like? The people that you'd really like to work with because you really like them, because they're really nice, because you really get along. Maybe you even feel like you have something to teach them. Those people are mostly useless. They're terrible to work with. Because your whole relationship is based on getting along, and you're not going to get along if you're building anything worthwhile. And they're not useful to you. If they were useful to you, you wouldn't get along with them so well. If they were useful to you, they would be challenging you on a daily basis. They would be making you feel stupid. People who can do things that you can't do, people who can do things you can't even comprehend, right? For us, like marketing. Right? Like salespeople, business development. What are these things? They're not engineering, so they must be easy. They're not. If you try to work with those people based on how well you get along, you're probably not going to do very well. But if you try to work with them based on how well they can do what you can't do, then your project might actually scale beyond your own capabilities. And you might actually have something that's better than like one person good. One person good is almost never good enough. This was the best thing, by the way, about working at Apple. Every day, I felt so stupid. Just surrounded by you'd meet somebody and they'd be the smartest person you ever met, and then you would watch them talk to somebody who made them feel stupid, and you'd just be like, what is happening right now? But there's other things too, right? If we had had this conversation maybe a year, maybe a couple of years ago, I guess at this point, I would probably be telling you to go out there and work yourselves to death, because that's what I've always done. And then that moment actually came where I was walking home from being at work for, I don't know, a week. You know the kind of work where eventually you stop coding because you just fall onto the floor, and then you kind of wake up and go back to coding? Hopefully not, but I did. And then I was walking home, and then this happened. I think I was 36. I had to go see a cardiologist. And at first I was really worried because I was like, man, if I have a heart attack, like that's going to be it. But the diagnosis was kind of even worse, because they're like, there's nothing wrong with your heart. There's nothing wrong with your vascular system. There's something wrong with your life. I've learned that stress is a drug that will kill you. There are two kinds of stress. There's the stress that you have because you're doing something that is relatively important, that you really care about, that is actually necessary. The kind of stress that you wish people would have when you're trying to get help, and they're just like, I don't know, it's not my job. But then there's the kind of stress that you have because it's fun to have stress. It makes you feel important to have stress. It makes you feel justified in your actions to have stress. I have done the most dangerous driving when I have been under stress. That's the one that will kill you. Unnecessary stress that you allow yourself to get into for fun, like problems that you try to solve because you do not know anything but solving problems, these are not healthy. These are things that will kill you, or just straight up waste your time. I've also been hacking a lot on the computer that is in me, in all of us, the brain. Neuroscience is a bit of a hobby of mine, and I've learned a lot about it these past couple of years. One of the things that's most fascinating to me is the way that the sort of left-right brain split is understood these days. We used to think that it was all very specialized, where you have sort of this over here and that over there and this over here and that over there, but it doesn't actually work that way. It's more like two co-processors that are running at the same time and experiencing the same set of inputs, but then coming to different conclusions because they operate fundamentally differently. One is kind of like the GPU. It's very fast but very specific. And the other is kind of like the CPU, where it's much slower, but it's much more general. Typically, we refer to this as the left brain and the right brain. It's not necessarily on the left side or the right side, but that's just sort of the terminology that we're most used to. The left brain, I like to call it the focusing brain, because this is the brain that is super focused on what is actually happening. It's so focused, it's literally blind to the other half of the body. So if somebody damages the other part of the brain, they will forget that they have the other half of their body. And if you remind them of this fact, they will lie to you to make up any story, to keep in their head the fact that I don't know whose hand this isn't my hand. Because the focusing half of the brain is incapable of being wrong. It has no idea of being wrong. It can recognize when other people are wrong, but it cannot recognize that it is wrong. That is entirely done on the other half of the brain, the holistic half of the brain, the half of the brain that sort of takes everything into consideration and tries to see things from different angles. That part of the brain is much slower, though. And the way that the brain works, one part says, I've got the answer, and it kind of shuts the other part down. You have to will yourself to use both halves of your brain. Here is the best exercise for practicing this. When somebody says something that is wrong, pick anything that I've said so far, where you're like, no, that's wrong because this and this and this and also this. That's not exercise. That's a big waste of time. That's masturbation for the brain. But actually stopping to think, in what way is that right? Because most things, because of the vagaries of how language works, most things are both true and not true, depending on how you define the words, depending on what you mean by it. And a lot of times when something strikes you as untrue, it's actually true in a different sense of the word, often the sense that was meant. But you have to kind of take the trouble to think about it. It's really hard. Figuring out how you're wrong is really hard. It's unpleasant. You don't like doing it because it's exercise. Exercise is good for you. It would be really easy and obvious for me to say, well, here's the thing. Apple concentrates on people. And that's true. But so what? Like, what does that mean? I'm sure if you ask anybody, they'll say, oh yeah, we also concentrate on people. What does that mean? Concentrate on spying on people? Maybe. Actual psychology, though, actually figuring out how people work, this is really important. This is why, for example, we like having diversity in our companies, because we've seen the statistics on what the actual market is like, and we're not like most of those people. We're not like most any people. One thing I do know about people, though, is that they remember how you make them feel. more than anything else. Maya Angelou said this. People will forget how you've wronged them. They'll forget what you've done for them. But they will never forget how you made them feel. You know when you're right and you're telling somebody and they're just like digging in to fight against you? Maybe you made them feel stupid. Maybe you made them feel unimportant. Nobody wants to feel unimportant. Everybody likes to feel important. There's nothing else to say. Everybody likes to feel important. Think about it. Here's something that I've wrote recently. This is interesting. You know when you have this person that you've known for a while, and then they do something or say something or behave in some way that is just really disappointing to you? I think that most of us grow up kind of saying, I'm going to get away from these people. I don't like people who are disappointing to me. One strike, you're out. And so you discard those people and then you find new people who are perfect because they've never disappointed you. And you also don't know them. And this is something that I've come to understand, especially when you're picking a team. But even with your friends, relationships are based on disappointment, or rather the balance of knowledge and disappointment. How well you know somebody versus how much that person has disappointed you. Somebody who you know very well, who has disappointed you, you know their limits, you know their edges, you know their boundaries. They are a real person in your head, and not an imaginary person that you filled in based on who you want them to be. This is a good exercise for your brain, because this is also true of our work. Our work is also disappointing frequently. We so often want to throw things away and start again with something that is perfect and new and unspoiled. But a technology that is well known and disappointing is a technology whose edges are known, is a thing that is real in your mind and not merely based on wistful thinking. Wistful thinking is the thing that prevents you from admitting the truth to yourself as necessary to become that good. This one's just for me. I've discovered that friction is a real issue in development. Like any kind of friction. Just people on the internet who are pissed off at you. Friction. Right? People who are fighting with you over the credit for something or are pissed off at you because you didn't give them enough credit or you gave somebody else too much credit or if you focus first on avoiding friction with your projects, avoiding hype, avoiding any kind of credit seeking, if you sneak into a project, do some very necessary work, and then sneak back out with nobody ever knowing you were there, you can do 3 times as much work as you're doing now. With all the worry about credit, with all the worry about telling people what you're doing. Just do it. Shut up. Do it. And then shut up. That is the most effective way to work. Not the most fun. But who cares about fun? I'm just kidding. You should care about fun. Fun is awesome. But most fun is useless. You know how earlier I was talking about when you go to like a counter and the person just doesn't seem to care about helping you? You know how I talked about how when you try to do something, you put yourself in a position where evil is the default? Taking responsibility for the world is fundamentally what we do as engineers, as designers, as creators. We do things. We have ventures. That is a form of taking responsibility. Maybe you don't think of it as taking responsibility. Maybe you think of it as just doing something that's fun or interesting. But you need to take responsibility. We need to take responsibility for the things that we do. We hate taking responsibility. If it's good, we definitely want responsibility, but otherwise we don't. Right? We say, you know, the human race will catch up to the technology that we're making. The laws will catch up to the technology that we're making. Everybody will deal with the technology that we're making. Oh, did that break? That wasn't my fault. That was them. It's like maintenance, right? Maintenance is the unglorious thing that nobody wants to do that is the most important thing that keeps everything from falling apart. We would much rather build things on top of other things than worry about taking care of them, than worry about taking care of each other. And this is unfortunate because, like I said, evil happens by default. I have a friend, Farouk, who we were talking about feminism, which is a very complicated topic, and he was saying that the world is kind of like one of those moving sidewalks, and you're facing the wrong direction. And so you're just sort of moving backwards all the time, and you have to actually take the effort of moving forward just to stay where you are. That's hard to accept, but it's also true. If only because corruption abounds. You want to know what I learned from working in the nonprofit world? Corruption abounds. I spend a lot of time thinking about this. I spend a lot of time thinking about ethics and sustainability. It's something that's not really part of what we do. It should be. It needs to be. But it's not. It's mostly something that we just sort of talk about, pay lip service to, try to avoid. This is what I spend most of my time thinking about these days. This is why I'm so down on all this stuff. You get it? Like, I'm not depressed about life. I'm super stoked about life. But this shit? What are we doing? Ethics. Let me give you just a 2-minute primer on ethics. 1, categorical imperative and sustainability. Everybody has to be the same. If everybody does the same thing, does it destroy the system? If so, it is unethical because it is unsustainable. Unsustainable things are unethical. If you have a coffee machine and everybody has to pay for their cup of coffee so that you can buy more coffee at the end of the week, and you say, I'm not going to pay, somebody else will pay. If everybody does that, categorical imperative, everything will fall apart. Unsustainable, not ethical. That is the basics of ethics. Empathy, the basics of ethics. But there's another thing too, informed consent. This is something from medicine. You might be surprised to know that I did not major in computer science. I majored in journalism pre-medicine, which means that I was a journalism major, but I took a bunch of science classes and ethics. Informed consent is why when you go to the hospital, you know what's going to happen to you before you have it happen to you. In research, up until recently, this was necessary to prevent us from having things like the Stanford prison experiment happen again, the Milgram experiments where people shocked each other to death happen again. Informed consent is very simple. I am responsible for making sure that you understand what I'm about to do to you. And I have to get your permission. I cannot sneak permission. I cannot get you to agree to a document that is 56 scrolling pages long, nowhere near where you're actually able to access it. I cannot pretend that you've read some document and then say, well, implied consent is informed consent because we informed you and you consented. The EULA, the End User License Agreement, terms and conditions, these are all unethical. Collecting people's information to sell to the highest bidder as a business model is inherently unethical. Spying on people is unethical. Anything that happens to another human being without them being fully cognizant and willing to participate is unethical. It fails the categorical imperative. If everybody behaves this way, the system will collapse. If you want proof, observe the system. What have we done? To what end? We put cameras on everything. We put microphones on everything. We put GPS trackers on everything. Leave your phone recording. Put it in your pocket. Go about your day. Listen to it. See what you can hear. See what anyone who wants to hack into your insecure ass, intentionally hobbled phone can hear. What have we done? Whether you worked at Apple, or Google, or Microsoft, or Facebook, or you just hacked the web because you hated all that shit, We all gave people reasons to carry these devices. For what? So that the government can watch us masturbate? The government and every hacker and blackmailer and doxer? Have you ever read 1984? You know what that book is about? It's about fear. It's about the fact that if you are afraid, you can be owned. And being owned is worse than death. See the movie 12 Years a Slave? Being owned is worse than death, my friends. And we have enabled this. We, us, we did this. We did this. Hard truths, motherfuckers. We did this. Here's the truth. We don't need more technology. If all of us stopped doing what we're doing, the world would probably be better off. We have all the technology we need. We have really big problems that need to be solved that don't need better fucking phones. Here's the technology for you, 3D printing. We have this. Atmospheric carbon is destroying everything. We have the technology, 3D printers, that will suck the carbon dioxide, use them as feedstock, and just print with it. They'll print their own solar cells. You can use them to print food. They're called trees. Maybe you've heard of them. A tree is 95% sequestered atmospheric carbon dioxide. We're trying to figure out how to make algae blooms to suck all the oxygen out of the ocean and give it up to the jellyfish. Or we could go to the tropical deserts that used to be tropical forests, and we can put the trees back. That's what I'm doing. I don't care what Apple announces today. Because we're all going to die. And I'm concentrating on things that are important to me. And so should you. Thank you.
I'm slightly afraid to ask for questions. I feel like I need to go and have a bit of a lie down to process what I just saw. But I will ask, does anybody have any questions for Mike? Can I see any hands? Okay, I've got one before we were schooled on ethics, which I'm now afraid to ask. But so you talked a lot about what makes Apple good. What makes Apple good. And a lot of it was around our practices, around how we treat ourselves, around our development practices in that way, like us. But a lot of it also seemed to be core user experience style things. This is something that I've been seeing a bit more. Do you think that that is one thing that developers need to be looking at in terms of user experiences, like tooling themselves up on that, understanding how to make things better for humans?
Yes, obviously. Like, that's what Apple is about. Like, that's what they stand for. They stand for the fact that people will pay money for a good experience. That's absolutely true. Yeah.
And then we should use that to make things better.
I mean, basically, yeah, that's it, right? I mean, I wanted to get up here and I wanted to say the reason why Apple produces things that are better is because the people at Apple care more, because they show up earlier, because they work harder, because they sacrifice more, right? We will buy you a new family. I don't think that's true. I think that we're all working pretty damn hard. I don't think anybody in here is lazy. You're at a tech conference, for God's sakes. You're obviously not lazy. You showed up here. What I do think, though, that's just the price of admission, right? Showing up and working hard is just what it costs to do this stuff. Sacrifice is just what it costs to do this stuff. The thing is, we have to focus on the right things. It's just like that gorilla study, right? The one where it says, watch how many times they pass the basketball. And then afterwards, they're like, did you see the gorilla? That basketball passing is an unimportant task that is occupying your mental capabilities. And the gorilla is something that's actually important that you're not even aware of because you're focusing on some stupid shit that doesn't matter. Like what's going on Facebook today or what the idiots on Twitter think. And you know, I mean, These are lists of my friends, but somehow when we get on the internet, it's like when we get into cars, except we can hear all of the nasty things that we say to each other. I have friends, they're online, I follow them, and then I get together with them, and I take the stupid fucking iPhone, and I throw it over there. Once, literally, into the television, because fuck both of them. And then I hang out with people, understand ourselves. That's how we take care of each other. That's what makes Apple good.
Brilliant. Are there any other questions? Can I see any hands?
I'll be on the panel too.
Oh, here we go. There's one right down here, just running a mic to you now.
Can you say a bit more about the tree planting project?
Yeah, totally. It's just kind of something that I've started. So, it's all just kind of in the dream phase at this point. The phase of the project is basically trying to get people with time to kind of write down these ideas and start plugging in actual numbers, like engineering. I'd like to focus on Madagascar, because Madagascar. And here's the thought that I have, and maybe this is just pie in the sky, I don't know. But it seems like the thing that prevents us from making more trees is a basic lack of water and nutrients in the soil, but more water than anything. And there's a bunch of sub-technical solutions for this that have been developed in the Arab world for de-desertification. A lot of them use a lot of oil, but not all of them do, because not every Arab country has oil. So Egypt, for example, has a really nice, way better than the seawater greenhouses that they're building here in the UK, where it's just like a plastic tent that holds all the water in so that you can sort of rebuild the entire ecosystem at one time, but you need the water. And obviously we can do water trapment and stuff, but one imagines that there's not too much water since rainforests also make the weather. So I was thinking, you have server space that you're renting, right? But if you could instead spend that money on a different server hosting platform that was exactly the same, except that it was 100% solar powered, because, big tropical desert, and then also it was being cooled with ocean water, and steam was being captured at altitude and then run down an aqueduct to the interior to put the trees back, we could do that with all kinds of technology. Most of the stuff that we do generates heat. We could launch, rockets from Madagascar. You know how much water they dump onto a rocket launching pad? I'd love to talk to Elon Musk. I don't want to work in LA, but in Madagascar, sure. So that's what I'm thinking. There are smarter people than me who are already doing this. I've started a garden. I'm learning to grow plants, to grow food, just so that I can have a respectful conversation with the people whose expertise I'm going to need to make this kind of thing happen. And I've learned recently, I thought that I was going to abandon all of this and kind of go do that, but it turns out that a lot of us are really super interested in plants and gardening and also giant projects that are insane but not impossible. And so, right now it's all a big dream, but hopefully within a couple of years, after I've retrained myself in different technologies, we can have this conversation again, and we can go out there and kick some ass and actually save the world for real and not making apps or whatever.
Brilliant. One big round of applause for Mike. Thank you so much. So we have a break now, so you can go out, get some coffee, and digest what you just heard. Come back in here. We will start afresh at supposed to be 1:45. We'll aim for 10:02. Get back in here for 10:02 so you can see Eric Hellman, Mike Tulty, and then the panel where Mike will be coming back to be joined by Eric and Mike. Too many mics. Thank you, everyone.